The moment Teyana Taylor's arrest hit live TV, it felt like time had slowed, and yet everything moved in chaotic, unpredictable bursts. 1 second, she was walking confidently across the studio floor, a picture of poise and charm, her outfit sharp and flawless, reflecting the energy of a woman in control of her life and her career. The next second, the cameras caught a sudden shift, a ripple of tension that seemed to vibrate through the air. Security appeared out of nowhere, moving with practiced urgency, and the realization that something serious was happening spread across Teyana's face like a shadow. There was confusion in her eyes, a fleeting glance of disbelief that mirrored the reactions of millions watching from home. Fans froze in front of their screens, unsure whether what they were seeing was real or some staged drama. The reality was undeniable. She was being restrained, and the flashing lights of the cameras reflected off the metal cuffs, casting a stark, almost surreal glow across the scene. In those initial moments, the world saw only the surface. Teyana had been preparing for what seemed like any other day on set, interacting with the crew, smiling at producers, checking her phone between takes, a calmness that suddenly shattered. It was jarring to witness a woman who had spent years building a polished, stylish public image caught in a raw, vulnerable moment that television didn't soften or edit. The shock radiated through the audience, live commentators struggling to put words to the scene, their voices wavering between professionalism and genuine disbelief. Social media, as expected, exploded instantly. Clips of the arrest circulated within minutes, each share accompanied by stunned commentary, GIFs looping her stunned expression, and fan reactions ranging from outrage to sympathy. Every time the footage replayed, it seemed to reveal new micro-details, the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands trembled slightly as they were guided behind her, the quiet frustration in her gaze, all of it painting a picture of a moment no one had been prepared for. People couldn't stop speculating about what had led to this exact instant. Some assumed it was a simple legal matter blown out of proportion, while others feared there was something far more personal at play. The cameras, relentless and impartial, captured every angle, leaving nothing to the imagination. From one angle, she looked entirely in control, standing tall despite the situation. From another, viewers could see her trying to communicate with someone just out of frame, a subtle movement of her hands that spoke of desperation and disbelief. There was an almost cinematic quality to the chaos, the way lights reflected off the polished studio floors, the frantic energy of reporters leaning in for the best possible shot, and the soft, almost imperceptible sounds of murmured instructions from security. In that moment, Teyana was no longer just a performer or a celebrity. She was a human being caught in the unflinching gaze of the world, her privacy evaporating with every live feed. The confusion wasn't limited to fans. Studio staff were equally stunned, caught between their roles as professionals and as witnesses to an event that none of them had anticipated. Producers gestured urgently, trying to redirect cameras and crew, while some cast quick, anxious glances at Teyana, unsure whether to intervene or maintain protocol. The tension was palpable, and it was impossible not to feel the collective shock. For those watching from home, the moment was surreal, almost like watching a slow-motion accident. People paused, rewound, and watched it again, hoping to catch something they might have missed: a clue, an explanation, or even a hint that this was a misunderstanding. Each replay seemed to reveal another layer of vulnerability, the way she adjusted her hair nervously, the slight furrow of her brow, the subtle but unmistakable quiver in her jaw as she processed what was happening. It was an arrest unlike any the public had seen, one that exposed a side of Teyana no fan had ever been allowed to witness, a side raw with shock, fear, and uncertainty. Even the seasoned commentators covering the scene struggled to maintain composure. Their voices occasionally faltered as they described the incident, offering context that only raised more questions than answers. They speculated about what had happened before the cameras started rolling, whether there had been warnings, exchanges behind the scenes, or other events that led to this explosive moment. Rumors began to swirl immediately, fueled by the intensity of the footage and the undeniable impact it had on viewers. Some insisted the arrest was mishandled, pointing to moments where Teyana seemed to attempt dialogue with authorities, her words lost in the chaos. Others focused on the visuals alone, analyzing every hand movement, every step, and every glance for evidence of wrongdoing or injustice. The public's fascination was instantaneous and intense. Within minutes, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube were flooded with opinions, memes, and emotional responses as millions tried to make sense of a situation that seemed impossible to fully understand from a distance. Then there was the leaked footage and angle that showed moments no live broadcast could capture. In it, Teyana appeared slightly earlier in the sequence, caught in a more private struggle, a quieter and more intimate moment that suggested her arrest was only part of a larger story. Fans pored over the clips, pausing, rewinding, and debating the meaning of each frame. It added a layer of complexity to an already intense scenario, prompting questions about whether this was just a minor misunderstanding blown out of proportion or something far more personal and consequential. The raw energy of the footage, paired with the live broadcast, created a narrative that the public couldn't ignore. Teyana Taylor, celebrated for her talent, beauty, and strength, had been suddenly stripped of her usual control, exposed to millions of eyes, and forced to navigate an unfolding crisis that seemed almost too cinematic to be real. Amid all the chaos, there was an undercurrent of empathy for Teyana. Viewers couldn't help but imagine the personal impact of such an arrest. The fear of being handcuffed on live television, the anxiety of knowing that her children, friends, and fans were witnessing a moment of vulnerability she had never intended to share. The arrest wasn't just an event, it was an emotional earthquake, shaking the carefully constructed image of a woman who had always been in command of her career and personal life. The shock was compounded by the juxtaposition of her polished, public persona with the raw, unfiltered reality of the arrest. It reminded everyone that no matter how strong or confident someone appears on the outside, sudden events can strip away that armor in an instant. Every second of that arrest played out like a story within a story, the live footage serving as the first chapter in what would become a narrative filled with rumors, theories, and intense fan speculation. From her subtle reactions to the hurried gestures of security, from the expressions of stunned reporters to the whispers among the production crew, the scene was layered with tension and emotion. The moment marked the beginning of a story that would dominate headlines, social media feeds, and fan discussions for weeks, leaving no one untouched by the shock of seeing Teyana Taylor, a figure so admired for her poise and talent, caught in such a vulnerable and public moment. In the end, the arrest was more than just a legal procedure. It was a dramatic collision of celebrity, human vulnerability, and the unrelenting gaze of the public. It was a moment that raised questions, sparked debates, and created a storm of emotion that few could have anticipated. And for Teyana, it was only the beginning. Every look, every gesture, every paused replay added to the intrigue, leaving viewers desperate for the next layer of the story, hungry for insight into what really happened behind the flashing lights and the chaos that played out before millions of eyes. It was a moment frozen in time, a shockwave that would ripple through her personal and professional life in ways that no one could yet predict.